A lot of times our patterns that we have in our relationship are like driving to work. You don't even think about it. You're on autopilot. You get in the car and 15 minutes later, or however long, you're at the office, right? You just showed up. We go through our relationships that way. So to change that, our brain goes, freak out. This is a different pattern. I could totally mess up here. There's a lot of risk there. It's scary. So we don't change, but it takes an incredible amount of courage. Welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. I'm your host, Dan Purcell, a Christian marriage and intimacy expert and coach. I'm on a mission to help couples have the best sex and most emotionally intimate marriages possible. Our episodes cover topics you've always wondered about and are packed with practical advice designed to help you take your marriage to the next level. It's interesting that we live in a day and age where it's not the popular thing to want a family and a strong, committed marriage with complete fidelity, right? We read news headlines such as, "Single women are more wealthy," or "Divorce is the most ultimate form of self-love." At least I've read that and I think that's silly. At least in America, the trend is to make wealth the ultimate measure of our progress in life. You hear about college students graduating and putting careers before dating and marriage, for example. And I'm not immune to any of those messages myself. A few years ago, I was working long hours getting my new business off the ground. I was recently unemployed and had to make this business work in order to feed my family. We had gone past the initial stage where things were really stressful and on edge, and now had a consistent income we could count on. But my habits of working long hours remained. All this was happening around that special time in my marriage years ago when my wife and I started to talk more frankly about our marriage relationship, and I had learned how much she really wanted me available and home, especially in the evenings, to be with her instead of off in my home office doing emails and proposals and other work to do. I had serious FOMO. I didn't want to let my wife down, but I also didn't want to miss out on a few business opportunities. Besides, I got a big hit out of my hard work and also chasing the next dollar. But once we started having more serious conversations about our relationship, what's important to her, and also around serious conversations about improving our sex life, which meant we needed to spend more time together as a couple to work things out. At the time, that felt like I needed to make some serious changes that I needed to make in my lifestyle and my approach to how I spend my time. But I gotta tell you, if you're looking for an investment that will give you a return on happiness, I can't think of anything more of lasting value than a vibrant, passionate, and intimate marriage. And children, for those that have children, can also bring an incredible amount of joy as well. Having a marriage I'm excited about is worth everything to me. This is part of the backstory of how this podcast you're listening to came to be. In today's episode, you'll get to hear what I said on my friend Angelo's podcast. He recently interviewed me, and in our conversation, we talked about some really great topics such as why it's important to prioritize your marriage, why sexual desire differences arise in long-term marriages and how to solve it, and how to have candid conversations with your spouse about sex. We have our in-person retreat coming up October 10 through 13, and there are still just a few spots left if you want to snag them. If you're in an otherwise good marriage but wish things were better when it came to sex and intimacy, and if your circumstances allow it, you'll definitely want to attend our retreat. This retreat works because you're not surrounded by everyday distractions such as work and family, and you can devote all your energy to your relationship for a weekend. We also make it tons of fun, and you'll find all the details and how to register at getyourmarriageon.com website. Just click on retreat. Can I tell you about something I'm really proud of? It's a major milestone I've hit. Next week, I release episode number 200. I have been releasing a podcast episode consistently for 200 weeks. And I've been preparing a long time for this specific episode. I've put a lot of effort into it, and you're not going to want to miss it. In fact, I dare say episode 200 is going to be my absolute best podcast episode I've ever released to date. You do not want to miss it. September is just a few weeks away, and I want to invite you to join my wife Emily and I in making September your sexiest month you've ever had in your marriage. In fact, we call it Sextember. You can also win some pretty amazing prizes too by participating in our challenge, and details will be in the Intimately Us app. Speaking of September, we'll begin our next cohort for our men's coaching program. This is ideal for men that want to significantly improve sex and intimacy in their marriages. You'll get to work with me and my team for 12 weeks. You'll see so much progress in that 12 weeks time. So stay tuned for those details.
Welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Angelo Santiago, and this is the We Are the Men podcast, a show that is dedicated to sharing the stories of men who are all connected by a commitment to having a positive impact on the world through the actions they take in their own lives. My guest today is Dan Purcell. Dan and his wife, Emily Purcell, are the founders of Get Your Marriage On. They're on a mission to strengthen marriages by making lovemaking incredibly fun and deeply connecting. They're also the creators of the popular Intimately Us and Just Between Us apps that have been downloaded over 750,000 times. They are the hosts of the popular Get Your Marriage On podcast with over 1 million listens. In addition to their coaching program, they host romantic retreat getaways for couples and put on workshops to how to have a great sex life and deeper intimacy. Dan and Emily met in middle school and have been married for over 20 years and have 6 kids. And I was sharing with Dan before we hit record that I'm like really looking forward to this conversation. I don't know, I'm like giddy about it. Maybe it's just because it's a fun topic to talk about. I know I'm probably going to get something out of it for myself. And, I get to have these conversations with my wife, and like I've shared with close friends and other people. It's like, I feel like where I'm at right now in our marriage, we've been married over 11 years. It's like our sex life is actually great, and that has come from a lot of like exploration and honesty and deeper connection. And like almost for me, like a relearning of what sexual intimacy can look like. And so I'm actually curious to get your take on it, to what it is that couples come to you and your wife to talk about and how you support them. And also just get to hear a little bit about you, your story, why you're so passionate about this, and how it's impacted your own lives. So Dan, thank you for being here. It's an honor to connect with you, and let's get going.
Thank you. I'm honored.
And thank you for doing this work. Like, I'm serious. I mean, I know there's a lot of people out there doing incredible work. And that sometimes as I work with couples as well, it's like this is a topic that doesn't get talked a lot about, and the importance of sexual connection, lovemaking, having it be fun, not having it be this like deep, stressful, like, are we having enough sex? Are we having the right sex? Do I know what I'm supposed to be doing? All that. It's like, let's just talk about it. But before we get to all that, and I'm really curious about your retreats and all that as well, I just want to get to know you a little bit better and, where you are right now in your life. You, your wife, your kids. What season of life are you currently in? Like, what are you finding yourself experiencing that's calling into the next invitation for you in your work, in your personal life, in your family life that you see is alive with you right now?
Yeah, thank you. I'm 42 years old. Been married over 20 years. My oldest is 19 and my youngest is 7. So with 6 kids, that's kind of a range. It's fun. It goes boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl with our kids. So it's kind of a fun mix there. My oldest is getting ready to leave the house. He went to a year of college. He's about to take a 2-year break from college and go do some volunteer work, missionary service for our church, helping, serving people. And so I'm at a new phase in life personally as a father. I'm questioning myself, like, did I raise him well? He's about to leave. Like, what about all the 1,000 conversations we didn't have? Is he going to be okay? Because I know his tendencies and I know what he tends to struggle with. And I think life is 50-50. Parenting is 50-50. There's a lot of joy in it. There's a lot of frustration and, anguish in it too. So I'm enjoying, I don't know if that's the right word, but I'm in the middle of that mix right now with parenting and all of that.
Yeah, I can only imagine what having such a big range of age for your kids to be like, well, here, this one's going off to an independent life of his own individual journey. And then the youngest, it's like, well, I'm still doing this over here. I can only imagine what it's like to juggle that back and forth between you and your wife. And then also the work that you do. I'm sure it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Exciting?
Yeah. Right. Challenging, maybe.
Challenging. That's right. Yeah, that's probably right. The more honest way of putting it. Right. I would say, just before we start getting into your story a little bit more, is there anything for myself? I have a 4-year-old, and having one has been the challenge, the exciting challenge for me and my wife. For those that are listening that maybe don't have any kids right now, For someone who's raised 6 children and is still in the process of it, for you and your wife, like what has been something that you would want to share with them about the journey of parenting along with everything else? I know it's a little bit off topic of your work, but I think it would be silly for me not to ask.
No, I think it's very on topic because we're talking about how do you create bonds? I don't know. You just raise your kids. I'd say if you watch the news a lot, you'd probably be really scared to have kids because you can hear pundits say how it's, costs are going up. Like it's harder to raise kids now than ever. And you look at society and all the pressures on families and individuals, like drawing them apart. There's problems everywhere. I think problems exist anywhere. But I also, just as much as there are more problems, I think there's more resources for parents today than any other time to help them work through them. So ultimately, that story that gets repeated in so many different ways about the chief talks to his son about how he has 2 wolves within him. You've heard this story, yep? You're not.
Yeah, I have that book for my kid. We
Yeah,
read
yeah.
that one.
There's the wolf. One wolf is going to devour the other one. And who wins is what the son asks. And the chief says, the one you feed. And I think that's true when it comes to decisions around parenting, right? What are you going to feed into the fear side? Or are you going to feed into more of this? No, we do have this resource. I can trust myself in this. And there's no such thing as a perfect parent. The quicker you can acknowledge that, I think you get out of your way a lot easier. And you can actually enjoy parenting. And so kids are a joy, and watching how they grow and develop there's a lot of joy to be had in that. So don't discount that. Some couples I talk to are afraid of having kids because they're afraid of what it will do to their marriage, their overall marriage satisfaction. And the data does show after you have kids, overall marital satisfaction does decline. That's a fact. However, within that data set, there are couples whose marriage actually improved after they have kids. And there's couples that their marriage really went downwards after they had kids. So if you dive a little bit deeper and see what the difference is, you can still have children and have a strong, thriving marriage as long as you keep your marriage a priority and don't let other life pressures. Now, it can be a career, it could be pursuit of wealth, it could be raising kids, too much focus on kids. Anything that will take you away from the goal of having a strong marriage is going to affect your marriage. So just put that in proper perspective. These are the couples that are still making date night a priority. They're still making time together. They find sitters so they can have getaways together. They're investing in their relationship while raising children. So those couples are really thriving even with children.
Yeah, thank you for all that. And that's a great transition into started talking about what couples are prioritizing, right? Like we talk about having that strong parent to child bond, but now let's talk about like how the couple maintains that connection and that bond within themselves. And not only, like you mentioned, the date nights and the communication, like all those things are important, but how do we maintain that sexual intimacy? Because that's the work that you do. Yes, there's all forms of intimacy, like there's emotional intimacy, like spiritual intimacy. But here, let's talk about that. And another thing that you mentioned in your previous answer was like the fear of having children, right? The fear of even talking about certain things. It feels like in our general culture, kind of like a fear of talking about sex, a fear of actually admitting when it's not going well, or even celebrating like when it is going well, right?
Right.
So in the work that you do, when couples come to your workshops, when you see them downloading and kind of telling you about the app and what it's done for them, like where's their starting point and what is it that they're looking for? Like where are they and what's like the hurt that is causing in their relationship by not having the lovemaking experience that you want to offer them?
Right. My sweet spot is helping couples that have married about 10 years who have differences in sexual desire. And it's a bell curve, right? You have couples that never experience problems with sexual desire. It's always abundant, and you never hear about them because they don't have any problems. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have severe like sexual dysfunction, like penetrative sex absolutely hurts her, or he has severe erectile dysfunction. And then, but in this middle, in this bell curve, which is the majority of normal couples experience desire differences in their marriage. And that's where I come in and I really help couples. So that's the number one complaint. one person wants sex more than the other person. Typically, it's the men, but I've also worked with cases where it's the wife with a higher sexual desire, but the one with the higher sexual desire usually feels rejected, wishes the other spouse desired him or her more, wishes he wasn't the only one initiating all the time, and she feels used. She feels like, can we talk about something else other than sex? A lot of times they inherit anxiety about sex because no one talks about it. And if you have issues, you're not supposed to talk about it because no one else is talking about issues, or they don't admit to having issues. So
Right.
you feel like you're in an echo chamber, or you feel very isolated and very alone in it. So you begin to accept that, wait, this is normal. We're supposed to have sexual problems because I think you learn how to adapt to it instead of actually recognizing, no, this is a problem. We actually do need to have a stronger sexual relationship. And what are the obstacles getting in the way? We need to really work on this. And so I help couples that recognize that they really need to work on their sexual concerns before it gets too late.
Yeah. And then the question I have on the follow-up of that is, you've just painted this picture of the possibility of one partner kind of having a stronger, higher desire request, or the other partner having a much lower. What is the work that actually gets to happen so that this partner doesn't feel like it's not a compromise? It's not like I have to reduce myself in order to meet them, or I have to do something that's uncomfortable to meet my partner where they're at. What's actually happening? What's the emotional experience? What's the connective experience that actually brings the couples together to find what their sweet spot really is?
I'd say there's probably 3 reasons why that happened. Let me tell you about a couple I'm coaching now who's made tremendous progress. When they came to me, they said, Dan, our sex life is in the toilet. It is horrible. It's awful. And they have 2 kids. And while she was pregnant, she had very difficult pregnancies and nursing thereafter. Just sex was non-existent. And then they had another kid and sex was non-existent. So they're basically in a sexless marriage. And in their marriage, he's the one traditionally with more desire for sex, but he is so hurt and so rejected from all the time she said no, not now, or being shamed by his sexual desires that he's stopped initiating altogether. So if sex ever does happen, it's because she thinks, I ought to do it. It's been a long time. He's going to get grumpy if I don't. So she puts out. But the quality of the sex they have is very poor because the whole time he's thinking, she's not liking this. I need to hurry up and finish this quickly because she's just putting out for me. So then they start developing premature ejaculation issues because his mentality is he's telling his body, I got to go quick. And then she's not enjoying the sex because it's over too quick. And so it's just a constant downward spiral. And then they're coming to me, help us. What did we go wrong? So in cases like that, a lot of times it's just there's something wrong with the relationship dynamic. You've created a dynamic that just goes around and around and around. And my background is actually in computer science, believe it or not. And so marriages are a system. They're like an algorithm, if you think of it that way. Person A does this, person B responds by doing that. Because of the way person B responded, A then reacts this way. Think of it like a Ferris wheel, if you will, right? Which each car going around and around. So I help couples see their own Ferris wheels in their patterns. And once you can see it and understand it, and you're like, oh, right now, we're in this phase of our Ferris wheel right now. And I give couples lots of ideas and options and empower them to start making better decisions about how they're responding at each juncture of that whole Ferris wheel. And it doesn't matter who does it, whether the husband or the wife, because it's a system, right? It just takes one of them to start responding in a better way. And all of a sudden, their system starts improving overall. So today I met with that couple again. It's been a few months and they're having so much fun in the bedroom. It's more relaxed, it's more freedom. And she said to me, it's the craziest thing. I can say no now without any guilt. But because I can say no, I feel like I can also say yes. Whereas before she felt like she really didn't have a choice. She only could say yes. And for his part, he's way more confident in the bedroom. He's doing far more initiating than he did before. She's actually having orgasms and enjoying the time. It's something that went from nothing for years to now several times a week. But it's the quality. Their whole marriage has changed. They're like lovers again. And that's the important part. They like each
I
other.
love that. I love it. That is definitely the important part of having that be as an aspect of the relationship that just fuels and adds to the connection, to the love, to the experience of life that you're having as a relational couple. I love the idea of this Ferris wheel too. And even in my personal experience of working with coaches for myself, or my wife and I, relationship coaching that we have, having somebody being able to like scoop back and see that Ferris wheel. Because when you're on it, sometimes you can't
don't
tell
see
that
it.
you're on it, or you
Right.
don't see a way out of it. You're just like, well, I'm just going
Right.
to sit in this little seat and I'm just going to keep playing this music of the Ferris wheel going up and down. And so I love how you're able to do that and just invite different options and then let them make the decision that's best for them that leads to this outcome that you're sharing. So that's really beautiful. And a little bit on your story too, I got curious is, how does one go from being a computer scientist to a sex coach to working with your wife and creating these experiences to building the app and inviting couples to look at their sex life?
My wife and I definitely fit in the normal couple group. We've experienced pretty much every sexual frustration that typical normal couples have. We're very normal, is I guess what I want to say. And like most normal couples, we thought something was wrong with us, but we didn't know where to turn, so we just accepted that things weren't great as the norm. And when you live that way for so long, you forget that there's something even better. Until one day, been married shortly after 13 years, I had a conversation with a friend. And this friend opened up to me about his sex life with his wife. And these aren't conversations I have normally, so I was very caught off guard by this conversation. And he was telling me all of the fun things he and his wife were doing. Like just naming off, we did this. And they're very adventurous as a couple. And I guess you could say I had morbid curiosity. It's like, oh, gross. Wait, tell me more. No, gross. Tell me more. So I was like kind of shocked, kind of surprised. Like I really didn't know people do that. Like, you hear about it in movies or other people, but this is my friend and he's doing these things. Now, to be clear, he wasn't telling me these things to boast. His message was like, Dan, once my wife and I really started working on our sex life, our bond has grown closer. We're parenting together better. We're sleeping better. We're communicating better. Like all these other things in life are better because our sex life has improved. And he had something I didn't have. I could just tell there's something. He had something that I wanted really bad. I wanted that same level of adventure and freedom and excitement when I came home to my wife. So that night, I turned to my wife and said, hey, you'll never guess what kind of conversation I had with so-and-so today. And of course, she would never guess. And then I told her like what happened and what does she think? And that was probably that night the most vulnerable conversation we've had about our sex life to that point in our marriage. And we talked for 5 hours that night, just way into the early morning, because we realized like we have a lot that we've just ignoring or putting off that we don't understand. We just realized we both inherited a lot of anxiety about sex from the families we came from because it wasn't spoken of. Well, it was spoken of, but it was either reproduction or it was the thou shalt not talk, which I think each served its purpose, but we're missing the grander, like, no, this is to have fun. This is about pleasure. This is about connection and bond and excitement and privilege. Like, this is all so foreign to us. So we started really needing to like navigate what we think about these things. So within a few weeks, we had then bought a few books and found blogs and podcasts, and we just went all in. In a 12-month span, we read 12 sex and marriage books together. We binged podcasts, we devoured blogs, and our marriage started to really change. It started to really change. And if I was a great public speaker at that time, I'd probably like go, hey, we will talk about this. Or if I was an author, I'd probably write a book or something. Neither of those things. I just know how to make an app. So I thought, well, let's put what we're learning into an app to kind of share with others because our change was so profound. We wanted to help others experience that too. So we created an app called Intimately Us, and we put it for free. It's on the App Store and the Google Play Store. And to our surprise, a lot of people started downloading it and sharing it with their friends. and in Facebook groups and, online and whatever, and it really took off. And the more it took off, I'd get questions from people about their sex lives, and I don't know how to tell people no. I like to please. So I'd go do some research on my own, respond really thoughtful answers, and I really loved this work of helping couples with their sex life. A year after we released the app, we put on a marriage conference in our town. I live in a town of 200,000 people, and there isn't a lot here for marriage enrichment, I realized. There's a lot of stuff for other things, but interestingly, nothing to enhance or improve marriages, like something like a seminar or something like that. So my wife and I were both very introverted, and the idea of putting on a seminar was very daunting, but we went for it, and it turned into a conference. And we flew in keynote speakers. We talked to local marriage family therapists in town to teach breakout sessions. We found caterers to cater some dessert and some food, and we gathered up a ton of people to donate really fun prizes and exciting things that people can win. And we got the local radio station involved in sharing the conference. We put up signs. And anyway, 550 people showed up to our very first conference, and we rocked it. It was awesome. And that's the day I got the shot in the arm, watching couples walk out hand in hand, smiling, laughing, patting me on the back. It's like, that was awesome. You need to do this again. We feel like we need to have more conversations about this, because the heart of the whole thing was guys, you're married now. Let's learn how to enjoy intimacy in marriage better than we've ever had. And if you have obstacles getting in the way, let's get those corrected and fixed so that you can actually really enjoy passion in your marriage again. So that was the overall vibe. It's a very upbeat vibe. And so since then, I've done a career change. I've gone back to school. I've learned how to really help couples. I deep dive into human sexuality, but specifically on couples and their dynamics and how sexual desire really works in marriages. And that's my passion. That's what I do full time, day in and day out now.
That's amazing, man. What an amazing story. And it's so good to hear the trajectory of the curiosity, right? I love the story about your friend. And I also really like that you did that caveat that he wasn't there boasting about it. There's a very different energy when we talk to anyone about absolutely anything, right?
Yes.
Am I here coming off of trying to prove how great I am, or just be hey man, can I share something with you? And those honest conversations for me is what's changed my life. It's about everything, not just about sexuality, but also about emotional struggles, parenting. That's another huge one, that parenting we don't really talk about when I feel like a bad dad or whatever. But anyway, having that conversation and then you coming in with that curiosity and be let me follow this thread. Let me keep exploring. And then just seeing the wins after wins after wins. I'm really, really glad to hear that it's been such an uplifting story.
Thanks.
And so now, from being the guy that it's oh, I never expected anybody to talk to me about sex, right? Your friend, now suddenly
Right.
everybody's reaching out to you and talking about sex.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what these retreats are like. Say I'm somebody who is experiencing one of these obstacles that you're talking about, right? The obstacles of my wife and I our desire differences are just incompatible, or so it feels like, right? We don't know how to talk about it. The idea of having a 5-hour-long conversation about our sex life is nails on a chalkboard. I need to either talk to somebody or go somewhere and experience it with other couples. When a couple walks into your retreat spaces, your experiences, what are they getting themselves into? And what are they getting out of it when they come out?
First, we got to paint the scene. This isn't a stuffy conference room at a hotel. This is it's a destination town, and it's a resort. So it's beautiful surroundings. This is vacation. And every couple coming is absolutely nervous out of their mind to be there. Because they're going to talk about the most frustrating, difficult, private part of their marriage in a group? What? But first of all, I reassure them, you're not talking about your private details in front of a group. That's not what we're here for. And second of all, some people kind of get the wrong idea about it. And I just explained, there's no nudity here. This is not one of those kinds of things. This is squeaky clean. And we're here to really help you do a deep dive into the intimacy of your relationship. And so the surrounding is beautiful. Each couple gets their own room, their own bathroom, of course. There's lots of privacy. We bring in a private chef who is an amazing cook, cooks all of our meals on site so we can accommodate different dietary needs. And she's incredible. And there's a lot of fun. We just do things in a very fun way. We bring in video clips to kind of illustrate what we're talking about. There's a lot of laughter going on. We have a ton of surprises in our content where we teach. Every couple gets a gift bag with like $200 of fun stuff for the bedroom in the bag, along with their workbook and pens and things like that. In addition, for fun, we take them on some excursions. We have ATVing in the desert. It's near Zion National Park in southern Utah. It's this beautiful outdoor canyon, red rocks, great scene, and it's also a ATVing mecca. So people come here from all over to go rock crawling and all that kind of stuff. So I have a connection. We get 20 or so machines out and we go rock crawling. And that's an incredible experience, especially if you grew up like in the Midwest and you're surrounded by cornfields and come here. It's like a very different experience. You're not used to that. We also have canyoneering where we go rappelling down slot canyons. So there's a lot of fun to be had. There's some adventure to be had. We also take time. So we mix it with a lot of instruction and also encouraging couples to have certain conversations. So our retreats are 4 days long. And the first third is really spent on helping individuals understand themselves better. What are my beliefs? Where am I coming from? You got to understand yourself first before you're able to understand your spouse. So that's day 2 is really about connecting with your spouse. And then day 3 is where all the fun conversations have about how to enhance and improve sex in your marriage. So there's something for everyone, regardless of where you are on that. I want to tell you about a couple that came. She and her husband, they were our very last registrant because we limit it to only 20 couples. We want to keep it small and intimate. They took the very last spot. And before she came, her mother told her, I don't know what you're going to. This sounds really scary. What if it's all a scam? What if you show up and they gave you a bad address and there was nothing to begin with? Or worse, they're there to rape you and harm you or something like that. So she came with like her guard way, way, way up, right? And quickly found out that it's none of those things. It is legitimate. And she and her husband's biggest struggle is talking about sex in their marriage just brought up so many bad feelings that they just avoided the topic altogether. He wanted sex a lot. She didn't want sex at all. And so it just created this horrible dynamic in their relationship. They show up, and the first thing we talk about is taking personal responsibility, identifying, just becoming more aware. I have this framework. I call it ABCDE. So we talk about awareness. And then we move into discussions about balance in the relationship. And we talk about how when couples have this Ferris wheel effect in stress, they get out of balance where couples tend to become more emotionally enmeshed or they become toxically independent. And neither of those, one is very independent, one is very dependent, like codependence, think of it that way. Mm-hmm. And that causes an environment where you can't have true intimacy because I'm either so smushed up and belonging to my spouse that we feel tangled together, or we're so on the opposite planet that there is no way to connect. And so we help couples recognize what their patterns are in that. So that's the B for balance. Then we have conversations and we have sessions about courageous choosing. That's the C. A, B, C is for courage. And it takes an incredible amount of courage to change your patterns. A lot of times our patterns that we have in our relationship are like driving to work. You don't even think about it. You're on autopilot. You get in the car and 15 minutes later, or however long, you're at the office, right? You just showed up. We go through our relationships that way. So to change that, our brain goes, freak out. This is a different pattern. I could totally mess up here. There's a lot of risk there. It's scary. So we don't change, but it takes an incredible amount of courage. So we have tools where we help people with courage. D is for developing desire. And that's something that is not talked about enough is when you're first married or engaged or whatever, sexual desire is at an all-time high. Like your brain is just full of all these chemicals and you don't have to think about it. Desire is on tap. It's on demand. You could have sex 3-4 times a day even as a newlywed, right? Because it's always there. And then we kind of have this cooling effect about 18 to 24 months later where sex has become routine. We've kind of gotten used to our spouse. We figured out what we think is disgusting and don't want to do, and they think about what is disgusting and don't want to do, and you're left with the leftovers. So you're just hanging out in like a Venn diagram where that sliver where it's overlapping. That's what sex life is. And without a way to cultivate more desire in your relationship, sex gets boring, and then intimacy over time starts to erode. So we give couples real tools on how to develop real desire in their relationship for the long haul. Because you want to be married to your spouse a long time, then you got to put these tools in practice to keep desire going. And then the last is A, B, C, D, E. E is for embracing your eroticism. And we have conversations about what eroticism is and how to find your own things that you find erotic. This is the weird part of being human, I got to admit. Our eroticism is very personal, but there's a very weird part about being human, how we find certain things erotic that in the light of day, we're like, no, never. But in the right context, right situation, we're all about it, right? A lot of our eroticism is not politically correct. It's not something that you talk about normally in like a formal setting. So it's for a lot of people, they're scared of their eroticism. And we talk about why we're scared of it. And so we tend to run away from it. And we tend to indulge too much in it, and then we let it run our lives. So either position isn't a good position to be in. So we give couples real tools to understand their eroticism. But remember, every night we give them sexy homework. So there's something fun that they get to do together. And it's depending, like some couples come like that woman I told you about. Just, we can't talk about sex. Well, their homework is going to be a little bit adapted to their level compared to another couple where they're like, no, we're here, our sex life is good, and we're here to make it great. And so their assignments are going to be a little bit different. And mixed in all of that, we carve out time to have one-on-one private coaching sessions with every couple there. So we help and work with every couple one-on-one with their specific concerns and their specific circumstances. And then we create a system where we follow up with them and we work with them for 6 months after the retreat to keep the momentum going in a positive direction.
And then I imagine continuing with the sexy homework. I like that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The question I have next is, it's something that I had a really beautiful discussion with my last guest from last week, just about kind of like the darker aspects of sexual nature. Like you talked about the erotic, experience that each human
shadow
has,
work.
and even
and
even how far sometimes it takes us, right? The compulsiveness, the actions that like are really just out of integrity. How do you, in your experience in working with clients, acknowledge when somebody comes in with whether it's like some traumatic sexual experience or even just like a compulsivity that is damaging to the relationship? So, because what we're talking about here is the beauty in bringing the sexual energy to a beautiful place. But how do you confront kind of like the starker, shadowy aspects that may be present in the relationship as they walk in through your doors?
Gotcha. So this defines things real quick. There is a dark side to humanity. This is why we have the Hitlers and the Stalins and whatever, right? There's something about being human that has this aspect. And ignoring that part within each of us, I think, isn't helpful. If we always are so afraid of what's in the closet and we don't ever peek, we'll never know what we're fully capable of. So I don't think there's any harm in really understanding and becoming very aware of your own shadow tendencies. That is there. Some couples in sex learn to harness a little bit of it in a playful way. So you hear about couples that love being tied up, for example. And the difference, though, is it's in a playful space rather than in actual intent to do harm. There's full consent going on. They sometimes even rehearse, this is what we're going to do beforehand, so there's no surprises. And they're at a place where there's absolute trust, and they're not going to violate that trust with each other. And then you can play with some of this shadow stuff, and it can actually enhance the sexual experience and not diminish it. Sex doesn't have to be so cleaned up and sanctimonious all the time. Sometimes it can be raunchy. It can be really exciting. It can be fun. In its proper context, it can be extremely beneficial for a couple in that way too. Of course, every couple is going to be different in what their tastes and preferences are and perspectives. But just acknowledging that we do have a shadow is important. Then there's a shadow of like I was abused, let's say. When I was young, someone touched me in a way that made me feel very uncomfortable. And I could look in their eyes and I could tell that they enjoyed my discomfort in it. And that's a very difficult thought because I was violated. It was against my will. And when I'm with my spouse, and sometimes I get that flashback of that uncle or that stranger, whoever it was, that enjoyed watching me squirm and get uncomfortable in it. And all my defenses go up. And so I immediately shut down my sexuality in that moment. Those are really difficult things that people have gone through. How I help people through that is, part of it is, I really like this concept called internal family systems developed by Richard Schwartz, and you may have heard of him. But it's this concept that as a human, you're not monolithic. You're made up of different parts of you. And severe traumas, stressful events, things like that, like this example I gave you, freeze you at a certain point in the past. And so the work I do is help people kind of unlock that. Because you might have been 13 years old when it happened, let's say. You're frozen as a 13-year-old still in that aspect. So how do you unlock that? How do you kind of move beyond that? It's very, I'm going to use the word spiritual. I don't mean like singing hymns and praying kind of spiritual, but it's a spiritual work in that there's a deep purpose in the work we do to help people move through these difficulties and traumas. And it doesn't mean you'll never be triggered or things will come up. It's just you're more equipped to deal with those as they come up so you can actually thrive instead of being limited by that. There's also cases where couples come to me where one spouse, let's say, indulges a lot in pornography, and it's discordant use of pornography. What I mean is, because spouse A is using pornography, it really offends spouse B. They interpret it as a betrayal or interpret it as they're not good enough or some other issues. So I work with a lot of couples in that case too, because it tremendously affects sexual desire in the relationship. My take is, as I work with people that use, say, pornography, I hate calling it an addiction. I know our culture throws that out all the time. They're an addict, and they treat it like as if they were addicted to heroin or alcohol or something like that. But in the brain, it's not the same mechanisms. Research has shown this. MRI scans, it doesn't trigger the same mechanisms as a substance dependency addiction. If anything, pornography use lights up the emotional centers of the brain, very much akin to maybe someone who just doesn't want to deal with a difficult situation, so they're going to scroll Instagram mindlessly, or they're going to binge Netflix, or they're going to eat to numb themselves. It's more of that kind of a response. And we just use pornography because, man, it's effective. It solves my immediate problem right away, takes those bad feelings that I don't want to feel, and I feel something else very powerful instead for the moment. So once we can help couples and individuals understand why they're using pornography, what it's doing, frankly, they wouldn't be using it if there wasn't a benefit. What is the benefit you're getting from it? But helping them kind of more accept and commit to having what they want to do instead and living their life more in line with their deeper values, their highest values. That's the process to work through to help with those types of cases when that is interfering with a couple's sexual relationship.
Thanks for going there. Thanks for going so deeply into that because, yeah, those are as a variety of spectrum of possibilities of like what people can be carrying or dealing with at any given moment. And especially touching on like what you said, whether someone chooses to call it an addiction, I often refer to it as just like a numbing technique, and it can be either or, like depending on severity for me. But whether you said like it's food, whether it's pornography, whether it's social media, whether it's Netflix, right? Like it's this, like you said, kind of like an emotional blankie, something's going on. I need something that I'm not getting. So yeah, I think we could do an entire other podcast about that, which would be great. For now, we're getting to the end. I want to ask you one question that I've been thinking about. So your upbringing and your wife's bringing about how sex was talked about in your family. And I was actually just having this conversation like an hour and a half ago with somebody else about my own upbringing and how sex was just like not talked about at all. Not even to the point that you said procreation, thou shalt not. Like it just was pretended like it didn't exist. And so I came up with my own challenges around that. And I learned with friends and internet and all that stuff, right? Right. Now, this day and age, for me, maybe just talk to me as somebody who's raising a 4-year-old boy, what have you found to be like really healthy ways of having conversations about sex with teenagers, with those that are about to leave the house, right? Go to college. Just touch a little bit on that from your experience working with adults and seeing like how can we raise our children in a way that invites this conversation safely, openly, curiously, and in a loving way.
I love this because this is something my wife and I want to do better for our kids. So we're passionate about this. And just the other day, my son had questions about all sorts of things. We're talking about clitorises, we're talking about orgasm, how it happens, and like sexual desire, like cultivating it long term, eroticism. Like it was a great hour-long conversation about these things. And these are typical conversations we have in our home. Sometimes it's a dinner table topic, but you got to be age appropriate, first of all. So that's number one. Number two, my recommendation is have 5 positive conversations to 1 watch out conversation. Now, it is important we talk about how to protect against disease, right? If that's really important to talk about, or unwanted pregnancies. Like all these things are very important things to talk about. Like we're telling our daughter, like she's going to, with friends, a party or something, and I'm just cautioning her, never accept an open drink from someone. Because date rape is a thing, right? People can drug, it looks like a can of 7-Up, but really they put something in it and they can take advantage of you. So it's important that we have these conversations with them. But if that's all your conversation with them about sex, then their view is going to be very fear-based. And I don't believe in fear-based education when it comes to sex. I want pleasure-based, like this is good. So my ratio is 5 positives to 1 negative conversation about sex. Also, kids are naturally curious, and there's something about our biology where there's a disgust trigger in our brain talking to our kids about sex. And I think that's partially because, first of all, we don't look at our kids and are eroticized by our own kids. That's gross. We don't look at our parents and are eroticized by our parents. That's also gross. So there's something in our biology where we just don't even go there with family members. So you got to understand that's working against you. The second thing is, for a lot of us, we remember how terrified our parents were when they gave us the talk, that we just imagine that horror our child is going to experience, and we don't want them to go through that experience. So we instead avoid the conversations. So I think that works against us. So you need to overcome those 2 major barriers when talking to your kids about sex. Last is, you have to just always develop a good relationship with your kids. When they know that they can talk to you about anything, and this isn't like a one-time thing, developing a good relationship with your kids, especially in the teenagers, this is the work. This is what you need to do. Last thing I want to say is, I don't think it's the church's job. I don't think it's the school's job. I don't think it's your kids' friend's job or the internet's job to teach our kids about sex. It's the parents' responsibility. So a lot of us, we kind of grew up blaming, it was the church or it was the culture or it was whatever. Like, I don't buy that as an excuse. It's your parents' job. So if you didn't learn about sex, you can blame your parents. I believe it's the parents' duty and job to teach it. So you need to take that seriously.
I appreciate that, man. That is 100% in agreement here on my end. And I hope people see that. I hope people don't cast off their kids into the school system and be like, all right, they'll take care of them. They'll raise my kids. Like, no, these are our kids. Like, let's give them the love and attention and desire and the tough conversations and the challenges and the celebrations, like all of it. Let's give that all to our kids. So thank you for touching on that. For me personally, that was really insightful and good wisdom that I hope to carry on as my son gets older and starts having those questions, especially as he gets to become a teenager and beyond. So hopefully somebody who's listening also got some great information out of that. So now as we reach the end, I just want to give you a little space to, one, if there's anything on your heart that you came onto this podcast that you're like, hey, I really want to share this, or maybe something in our conversation that we didn't get a chance to touch on, that I want to give you the space to do that. And also, how do people connect with you and your wife? Tell us about the retreats coming up, the app, and we'll have all that in the show notes. But I want to give you the space for those 2 things.
Thank you. What's on my heart is I want to encourage you as a listener to talk about sex with your spouse. Have those conversations and always have it ongoing. And if you struggle, even know where to start, you can download my app, Intimately Us. I have a section there of conversation starters that gives you like hundreds of places to begin. Some of them are goofy, some of them more serious and more deep, but it gives you an idea of where to begin with that. The app, Intimately Us, is more than just conversation starters, though. It gives you tons of ideas for lovemaking. There's even games built in the app that you get to play, like in the bedroom, to really make lovemaking fun. Because if you want to be married long-term, novelty and experimentation and trying new things has to be a part of your relationship. Otherwise, it'll get routine and boring and old. So that's a big part of building a great sexual relationship. So that can be a tool. If you want help with you in your sexual relationship, we talked about my retreat and my A, B, C, D, E things. I took all that information and I have it in a course format coupled with coaching. And that's my Get Your Marriage On program. You can find that on my website. My website is getyourmarriageon.com, and you'll find tons of other free resources that I have there.
Awesome, Dan. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for coming on here, for having this conversation, for sharing your story, for sharing what you're going through, at home, what the conversations are at home, and also the support that you're giving to couples out there in the world. Hopefully, if you're listening to this and you feel connected to some of the things that Dan and his wife are doing, and you feel ready to either elevate your sexual relationship and your partnership to the next level, or maybe just confront some of these obstacles, reach out to them, check out what they have to offer. I highly encourage it. So as we close off, Dan, I want to invite you, as I do with all my guests and my listeners as well, to just a little visualization, if that feels good for you, to just see a final couple little words to share through this platform. So I invite you to take a nice deep breath, close down your eyes if you'd like, and begin to see yourself on an open field. Thousands of men are with you, and you are about to address the world. You begin to speak, and I want you to finish this sentence. We are the men who...
We are the men who care deeply about our intimate relationships.
Love that.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you're interested in accelerating growth in your marriage, either sexually, emotionally, or spiritually, I want to invite you to work with me in my affordable coaching program called Next Level. More information about Next Level and my fun and sexy apps for couples are available at getyourmarriageon.com. Please also don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss a single episode. And be sure to tell your married friends. I promise, they will thank you for life. Now go get your marriage on.